the flesh with the grinding of teeth. Instead of pizza, people were offered to eat so-called huike, a dish consisting of batteries, dirty diapers, ants, and turtle shells. In short, yet another reason that led people to switch to subsisting on pills. One of the videos discussed by Gramphamites debunks myths and tells Federation residents the true facts about Earth. For example, it turns out that dinosaurs never existed on Earth. In fact, it was those very Treeforkians who, in ancient times, deliberately buried various fossil bones all over the planet. But he is not sure if this can be believed. After all, other facts state that the smartest beings on Earth are bushes, not humans, and that the planet is actually ruled by goblins and reptiloids. From another video, it became known that somewhere in the depths of space there exists a galactic sauce vault. It is a neutral zone where all existing planets have stored all the most important sauces, and inside one of the vault sections, the inscription McDonald's Zequan can be seen. Strange that Rig hasn't been here yet. According to another article from FedConnect, the universe is home to cosmic entities over 750 million years old. They own entire solar systems where their beings cultivate various nations for sustenance. But even immortal and such powerful entities have problems. One of them was the so-called Third Exor Prism, whose destruction was joyful news for all giants. Also, according to them, something called the Trod appears once every hundreds of millions of years. It counts all existing planets at that moment in time. The Cramulons are also among these all-powerful immortals. According to the same article, they receive ions of accumulated knowledge from a mysterious hole. And unlike other giants, we know a little more about these headed beings, which allows us to get a general idea of all the immortals. The Cramulons can freely and effortlessly fly through space. They have their own gravitational field, so when approaching a planet, they can cause sudden weather changes and cataclysms. Here are some of the other designs of the Cramulons that were later rejected. A whole monomediaki on the site was dedicated to the quotes and exploits of that very shrimply Pibbles, the most influential leader in the field of civil PAV, whom Jerry could have saved. He supported many alien species, held the famous march through Fleur-Blurred Square, organized a protest in defense of the Tomakians from the planet Plopstar, and helped the Bapesians during a difficult time. They are still grateful to Shrimply. From another article on the site, it became known that these very Bapesians are quite strong and very fast, which allowed them to easily break all human Olympic records. So it's no surprise that they were introduced as the guards of Rimbly Pibbles. There also exists a type of multidimensional aliens called the Gambrasians. They exist simultaneously on multiple planes of reality. Being a multidimensional species, they do not enjoy being on Earth, as the entire local population manifests only in two planes of reality. In the second, dogs and people have simply switched roles, and according to the Gambrasians, that just seems too implausible. Moreover, the genitals of the Gambrasians do not manifest until level Z, so intimacy with humans is completely impossible. The gearheads, despite being robots, have gender, age, and emotions. They study in gear school and then in gear college. All their food is also replaced with gears on a stick, gear pasta, glazed gears, and even their vomit consists of gears. Several major wars have occurred on the Gear planet starting 754 years ago, and now in peacetime annual festivals like Gear Uber are held. For the gearheads, twigs are particularly dangerous as they can get entangled in their mechanisms. By the way, our familiar Revolio Clockberg Jr. stored a box full of twigs marked with a skull and bones at home as contraband. Most likely he was planning to use them to kill someone. Also in his room, a rather erotic poster can be seen in the background. The Zagarians from the 4th episode of the first season were named so for a reason. Their species name refers to Nigerian scammers. Zagarian con artists, Morty, the most ambitious and unlucky fraudsters in the galaxy. This refers to so-called Nigerian letters, where a scammer pretends to be a Nigerian prince, asking for help transferring millions in exchange for a cut. And all that's required is a small upfront payment for processing fees or taxes. So, Zagaria, Nigeria, you get it. And the scene from this episode where everyone in the simulation class suddenly cheers and supports Morty was originally supposed to end in an orgy, as the creators revealed in the DVD commentary. In the 3rd episode of the 2nd season, they mention that in the post-credits scene, when Rick Humming flies back to Unity and yells at Beta 7, He is sitting in the ship with an erection, without pants, and completely naked below the waist. We were just shown only his upper half. Now it's clear why Morty has that expression on his face at that moment. In the episode about the Citadel, the creators revealed where the so-called wish portal actually leads. Once, someone confronted him for not tipping at a cafe. In response, the Citadel decided to dump all its garbage straight onto that planet, which means that Morty Pigeon survived, simply landing on a pile of trash. And in the fourth episode of the third season, Million Ants from the Vindicators team was originally supposed to have a tiny friend named Three More Ants. There's also a deleted scene detailing what happened to Rick and Morty after their arrest in the giant world in the fifth episode of the first season. In the final version, we only got a glimpse of the interrogation and a bit of the trial. The rest of the text follows in the same fashion, maintaining the structure of the original without adding or removing anything. In the full version, they were first captured by a giant wife, then unsuccessfully fingerprinted. Then they were washed with water pistols, thoroughly checked, had tiny prison uniforms specially knitted for them, and were then beaten with tiny hands. Even the trial process lasted a bit longer. Another deleted scene continues the events of the eighth episode of the first season, in a universe where Jerry is a well-known actor in Abbott the Human Surgeon. After Jerry, completely naked, runs into Beth's house, declaring that the abortion was a mistake and that he wants to marry her, Rick appears behind him. He freezes Jerry and shatters him into pieces, mistaking him for a criminal breaking into his daughter's house. The scientist had brought food and wanted to invite Beth to lunch. The real Rick was very happy to finally see himself on TV. There is also a continuation of the seventh episode of the first season, about Summer's solo adventure and the whereabouts of her personal starship. Issue 32 of the comics picks up right where the episode ends. The main character says goodbye to the viewer. Rick blurts out that the credits have already rolled, and Summer decides to take a ride in her ship. However, spending more and more time with the perfect starship that listens to her and offers support, Summer falls in love with her vehicle. Literally, in every sense. They become so close that the girl is forced to destroy the ship to put an end to it once and for all. By the way, Summer's top from the Gazorp Field episode is an actual top by designer Marc Jacobs. Roiland chose it because it looks very cute. And after the episode aired, Marc Jacobs even retweeted Summer's top, saying she has great taste in clothing. Many people were also very interested in Morty's memory from the eighth episode of the third season. In it, Rick takes his grandson to a secret room on another planet, completely filled with dead people connected to some kind of machines. However, Grandpa didn't explain anything to the boy. In reality, this place is the set of a show from Interdimensional Cable that was cut from the full version of the eighth episode of the first season. The scene was deleted from the episode but was shown to viewers in the DVD version of the series. The show's premise was to reveal the tragic details of the lives of people in comas, and by cutting the scene from the episode, the creators effectively took this show off the air. Thus, Rick and Morty had to do the dirty work and take care of the bodies of those people. What a meta-reference. By the way, the show's writers had nearly 100 different ideas for Morty's mind-blowers. Some memories that didn't make it into the episode include Rick falling in love with a fire truck, Morty turning into a living painting, their encounters with fierce women, Rick eating a chicken nugget, Morty becoming an old man and helping his granddaughter, and even a story about evil Ewoks, among many others. At the beginning of the episode, when Morty looks into the Truth Turtle's eyes, it mutters something unintelligible in reverse. But if you play the clip backward, you can hear, "Paul McCartney is not dead." In the classroom, you can also spot a poster of Morty with the word recycling. This was the creator's way of hinting early on that Mortys are literally mass-produced in a factory. In episode 10 of season 3, Jerry wears a red robe with a Chinese character on the back that translates to weak. How ironic. Most likely Jerry himself had no idea. However, Jerry's insecurity didn't come out of nowhere. You might not have noticed, but the show has subtly hinted several times that Jerry was actually assaulted. And what do you think a rapist looks like, Beth? Do you think it's a Slavic man in a denim jacket with an unkempt beard and the smell of cheap champagne coming from his wart-covered lips? In the Pluto episode, Jerry tells a rather embarrassing story about Morty. What were you thinking when you were 5 years old, pooped your pants, and threw them out the bedroom window? This is actually a real childhood story from Dan Harmon, one of the show's creators. And if you were wondering what movie Morty wanted to sell to Netflix in the third episode of the fourth season, there is a moment where a draft script appears on screen. It's a heist film featuring characters named Arnaldo, Rodrigo, and Hector. They plan to steal a crystal ball from a museum by sculpting their doubles out of cake. We'll all die, but they won't realize that we were made of cake. In episode 6 of the fourth season, when Morty is telling a ridiculous story, a photo of Morty Jr. from the seventh episode of the first season can be seen on the wall. Morty still loves and remembers him, even if this was just one of the artificially created train stories. In episode 8 of the fourth season, when Morty uses his save state device, a movie theater in the background is showing the film Luba's Eggs. This is one of the interdimensional cable programs that exists only in parallel realities. By noticing this Easter egg, viewers could have figured out in advance that this was not Morty's original reality, and that the save state device was merely shifting him between dimensions at the moment of simultaneous determination. And in the third episode of the second season, a capsule containing a tiny Cthulhu can be spotted in the background of Rick's underground lab. Sooner or later, this experiment will have consequences, which we see time and time again in the show's intro. In the second episode of the second season, when Rick and Morty visit Blips and Chits, pay attention to what's happening in the background behind them. For several minutes, parallel to the conversation between Grandpa and grandson, Mr. Meeseeks desperately tries to help an alien win an arcade game, and when the guy finally succeeds, Meeseeks happily disappears. In the first episode of the second season, the time clone says, "And what do we see?" In the post-credits scene of the second episode of the fifth season, we are shown the future of the Rick and Morty universe, where at some point before the start of a news cycle, anthropomorphic animals, including a dolphin with a metal beak, will inhabit the world. In The Simpsons couch gag featuring Rick and Morty, aside from the crossover itself, there are also 3 references to Futurama: the Planet Express ship flying in the sky, a slurm vending machine, and a guy with a brain slug on his head. If you watch the show very carefully, you'll occasionally notice that Rick has multiple pairs of watches hidden under his lab coat sleeves, with the main ones under his right sleeve. These allow him to activate shields around the house, vaporize people, control decoys, and summon holograms. But on Rick's left wrist, there are 3 pairs of unusual watches, and their purpose remains unknown. The neutrino bomb, which has been mentioned several times in the series, is a weapon that emits a deadly amount of neutrinos upon explosion. Since neutrinos can pass through matter almost unhindered, when the bomb detonates, neutrinos will pass through Earth and deliver a lethal dose to the entire population in a fraction of a second. This is the bomb Rick was going to detonate in the pilot episode. However, according to Morty in episode 4 of season 3, the probability of the neutrino bomb actually exploding is only 60%, with a 40% chance that it won't work at all. This is why Grandpa and the nuke survived in episode 1, the neutrino bomb is armed. In the Rick and Morty VR game, through Rick's computer on Gazor Pazor Pazon, the Gazorpian version of Amazon, you can buy an issue of the intergalactic radio podcast 1% Visible, which contains rather interesting information. Guests on this podcast include Sally Glopt, a programmer, Perp Genut, a manager at Pazor Pazon from a universe where women never separated from men and continued evolving together, and Krebly Sarant, author of the book How We Fought Our Way into the Galactic Federation. This book explains in detail how the courier bags from the 10th episode of the second season laid the foundation for the Federation, and the podcast allows us to hear all about it. It turns out these bags have existed since the Federation's founding. Courier bags made it possible to regulate the import and export of all goods across the galaxy. Their unique design allowed them to adapt to transported objects, adjust to different environments, and traverse vast distances. Today, they remain the primary method of package delivery throughout the Galactic Federation, and without them it would have been impossible to establish connections between all planets of this massive empire. Already in the first episode of the third season, Rick nullifies the value of the Blimflar currency, leading to the temporary collapse of the Galactic Federation and the so-called Blimflar crisis, which deeply affected the lives of all Gramflamites. And it was most fascinating to observe this from the inside. On the day of the incident, the Gramflamites were particularly active on FedConnect. First, all the prison cells suddenly opened, then the Citadel crashed into the prison. The Federation's website started glitching for everyone, All financial assets disappeared from Gramphamite bank accounts in an instant. All payment cards and services stopped working. Trying to figure out what was going on, one of them stepped out of the office and witnessed a bloody massacre. And then, one by one, 5 Gramphamite prisoners were killed. A user known as G4288898 miraculously survived the chaos and used FedConnect as his personal diary for the following weeks. Life on Gramphlam Prime changed drastically. Rick Sanchez's actions led to complete anarchy and the loss of a standard currency. Everything was destroyed, many were dead, and monsters had emerged. Money no longer had value. The only acceptable forms of payment were food packages, children, or the heads of enemies, established by the hastily formed Cooperative Council. Entire homes were practically gone, and any remaining intact buildings were seized by real estate agents. They were fenced off from the chaos, and only those who could provide value to the new council were allowed inside. Soon, food on the planet ran out entirely, and in order to survive, the Gramphamites had to resort to the most disgusting means of sustenance. They drank their own tears, ate useless parts of their own bodies, the remains of dead friends, and even the eggs of their own offspring, conceived through self-fertilization. Yes, Gramphamites can reproduce asexually, and their species grows and matures at an astonishing speed. According to the same character from the 10th episode of the 4th season, a Gramphamite ally was half her age, and the girls were only 20 years old. So it's no surprise that within a few seasons, the Federation managed to regrow. After some time, Gramphamite society did begin to stabilize. Although the crisis had not yet passed, former Federation members started taking on low-level jobs paid in alternative currencies unaffected by the Blimflark collapse. One such job involved milking the living planet Shongi. Others found employment at Jerry's daycare, playing the role of bee smack, a secretion Gramphamites produce from their elbow joints, capable of dissolving even the toughest stains, including human blood. Thus, some of them became janitors in places no one else wanted to work. Deep beneath Gramphlam Prime, in a poisonous planetary layer, there are deposits of highly valuable gases. If extracted, they could be sold for massive sums. But since no tools or technology remained on the planet, the Gramphamites had to rely solely on makeshift means. Where exactly G4288898 decided to go remains unknown. He survived the worst times by hiding in a ruined prison, and at this moment, his story ends. He decides to step outside, face the terrifying cold and cruelty of the world, and hope to find a job among the previously mentioned options. That's the kind of story arc the Rick and Morty creators built back then. A saved copy of the old version of this site is available in the description if you want to explore it further. Right now, something similar is happening around Inside Job, the new animated series from the creators of Gravity Falls. It was just released recently. There's a website, codes, secrets, just like before. On April 1st, 2021, Adult Swim, the channel that airs Rick and Morty, temporarily rebranded as Adult Swim Junior, turning all its shows into their kiddie versions. The main characters placed in adult situations spoke with childlike voices and cute phrases. The show's intro was completely reanimated. Rick and Morty became toddlers. Childish problems, childish adventures, and adorable little monsters with tiny teeth. Even the closing theme was reworked into a baby-friendly melody. The creators also seriously considered making a Rick and Morty spin-off comic titled Tales from the Drunken Steps, set in the Tavern from the Giant World. This anthology would have told the adventures of the local inhabitants. By the way, the currency schmeckel, as stated by Dan Harmon, is worth a whopping 148 US dollars. Can you even imagine how much money was in that pouch? The creators also mentioned that when writing Rick and Morty, they work under the assumption that they have 1,000 more episodes ahead of them. They have plenty of ideas for future stories. So, Rick and Morty forever. 100 years of Rick and Morty. And one last fact for today. Not long ago, on October 11th, a Rick and Morty Halloween anime special was released, titled The Great Yokai Battle of Akihabara. Not sure if it has been dubbed yet, but the episode is available in free streaming on the official Adult Swim channel. You'll just need a VPN. By the way, this is already the 4th anime short for Rick and Morty, and they're actually pretty solid, definitely worth watching.